know how to send an SOS.
Right, good afternoon everyone, Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, staff, members of the public, media. To the very first Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of 2015. Most importantly, elected members, afternoon tea is at 3:15. And I ask that everyone has their cell phones on silent, and that doesn't include vibrate, because vibrate is picked up for our online viewers. And please remember to speak through the microphone when you are talking. Now I have, members of the public, there is a tea trolley out in the foyer as well. You please feel free to come and go as you see fit. Now I have an apology from, that's just come through from Democracy from Councillor McPherson. I have Councillor Gallagher for lateness, Councillor Green for lateness.
I'll move.
Thank you. Moved by Her Worship the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? And that's carried. And I do have a couple of councillors leaving early as well, and they have indicated to me, so we'll see how we go. Confirmation of the agenda. There's just two updates that I have. Item 14, the open air bylaw, is actually a recommendation to council. That's not on your front page there. And for our visitors in the audience, we have on the item 10, the Wairere Drive, we're going to take that with the committee, take that item first to accommodate those visitors and speakers on the petition. So if that's okay, I'll move that the agenda be confirmed. Second, Councillor Young. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No. And I've been informed by Democracy there is no public forum. So we are going to go straight to item 10. So I'd like to welcome the petitioners up to the front. Marina, is it Ian and Tom? Tom Hartley. Hi, welcome. So you've got 5 minutes to speak to your petition. And councillors and Her Worship the Mayor, this item is number 10 on page, you've probably already found it, 102. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, Worship the Mayor, Councillor O'Leary and King, and fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Marina Grantham Campbell, Tom Hartley, and Ian Bridge on my right from Neighbourhood Watch, Huntington. You have before you today the petition from Huntington requesting a safe right-hand turn from Huntington Drive West onto Wairere Drive, which at present is very unsafe and rapidly getting more unsafe. Up until we put the petition in, there had been a lot of contact with council with little response. Since the petition, we have received excellent feedback, in particular a comprehensive report which was very helpful. Last October we had a routine neighbourhood support meeting of our area and the intersection was discussed. It was unanimously decided that the only way forward we could see was petition. We approached a councillor to find out what avenues we had and how to go about them. The petition of 506 signatures over 2 weeks from 300 homes resulted. The support we encountered while we were collecting the petition was phenomenal, and the number of stories of accidents, near misses and contacts to council that had been tried were numerous. Can we ask council to address this matter urgently before a more serious or life-threatening incident occurs? As you come out, there is a lamppost in the way blocking vision, and the angle of the traffic is such that oncoming cars can be hidden behind each other. There is nowhere really satisfactory to cross to in the middle of the road, so that you are only crossing one lane of traffic. The traffic going at 80 k's makes it even more dangerous. We have been told that a slip lane separating the traffic would be a possibility, combined with a significant slip lane in the middle to ensure safety there as well might alleviate the situation. These measures would probably improve things temporarily, bearing in mind the rate at which the traffic is increasing along that stretch of road. I think I speak for most Huntington residents when I say what would appear the logical outcome to us who live in the area and experience the traffic flow daily would seem to be lights or roundabouts, about which would lead right-hand turning traffic from Huntington West and left turning traffic from Huntington East intersections. It also seems that Huntington West is much more central exit. We presently understand that the ultimate outcome when the road is four-laned will be a roundabout at the east end or Huntington East intersection. This we only found out about in January. To us in the area, this will mean the traffic from Huntington will be congested at the one entrance because there's no point turning left from the other entrance, then going round the roundabout and going back. This flow of traffic does not seem conducive to easily, safely getting to local activities. Thank you so much for the time to address this issue, which is a major concern. I take this opportunity to thank those involved in the excellent feedback we've received since we put the petition in. We look forward to working together to find a solution to this long-standing safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Before we move into the substantive report committee, are there any questions you have of our guests today? Councillor Mallett?
Have you seen the agenda? Have you seen the papers that we've got in front of us?
The council report.
The report?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen the report,
Okay.
yes.
Which there are three options there. I fully appreciate you're not roading experts, but do any of those seem to address the issue?
Oh,
Yes, temporarily, the issue would be temporarily addressed by the left slip lane coming in and an area that would hold 3 or 4 cars that would go and sit in the slip lane in the across that single lane. At the moment, it's very difficult to see cars. If there's a left-hand turning car, there are sometimes vehicles behind them, and sometimes the left-hand turning cars don't turn left, but a dedicated lane in there would make it a temporary and relatively inexpensive compared to other solutions, which we realise once we read the report that it's a major thing looking into the future, and that to have lights and roundabouts in terms of cost effectiveness would not be particularly viable at this stage, but that at least something temporarily, because inevitably accidents will happen. We're just trying to make sure that they're not as many, not as severe. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, just a question on the east and west exits and entrances into Huntington. It seems on the plan that more roadworks in the long term may be done on the eastern access and exit from Huntington. That to me appears to be the least favoured of the two exit and entrances. Is that your understanding? You would prefer that the roadworks were done on the west entrance rather than the east?
yeah, that is, the logical flow of traffic seems to be if the main exit can be the west one, and that would lead the right-hand traffic, and the other, and the east intersection would be quite a bit of left-hand traffic.
Are there more houses at the west end than the east end? Or
The west one is actually very central if you get a whole map of Huntington.
yeah, I've got a map here. Yeah.
No, not the map in the report.
Okay.
If you actually look at the map of where the subdivision of Huntington,
Yeah.
the west.
There's a greater
intersection-
concentration of houses at the western end rather than the eastern end.
Yeah, that's the most central intersection.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, just also, if you start from the Hukanui roundabout, between there and Huntington West intersection, traffic is going between 50 and 80 kilometres an hour. By the time it gets to Huntington East, it's going to at 80 to 100 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
So that traffic would have to slow down a lot more at the Hamilton East end rather than the Hamilton West end.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Yep.
Right, if there are no further questions, thank you. Councillor Tooman?
If I may, Madam Chair. Looking at the crash data, I noticed that all the crashes are for vehicles which are eastbound on Wairiri Drive, and there's no data there to show that the westbound vehicles are involved in the crashes. In other words, it's what I call gap selection. In other words, you've got to get the gap to get out into the middle of the road, and it doesn't seem to be an issue when you're in the middle of the road to make that right-hand turn. Would that be a fair comment or not?
No, that we were this very small gap in the middle of the road, and you do sit there very precariously. Yeah, the crashes do seem to be precipitated. That angle of traffic and cars hiding behind other cars is a major issue, but also the centre is a major issue as well.
So looking at the crash data there, which is there, all the crashes that I can see are for persons exiting from Huntington, failing to give way to the right. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a visibility issue. When you're turning right and the traffic
And somebody's turning left.
going east and turning left, you can't see the traffic that's going straight through.
Sure. Appreciate that. What about time of day? I believe probably the worst time to get out of there would be between, say, 7:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning. Would that be right? Okay. And what about the rest of the day? I suppose it's reasonably okay to come out of there maybe 11 o'clock in the morning when traffic is much lighter.
Sometimes it can be busy, other times you wonder where everyone is.
And
But
you people live in that area, so would it be fair to say the only safe option would be to turn left? No, the question is, would the only safe option be to turn left? It wouldn't be convenient, I realise that, but to turn left would be the safest option.
Well, that's what I have done on occasions, and you turn into Ringaweri, which I mean isn't a practical solution. You don't want all the cars doing that. On odd occasions, I've done that.
Or otherwise, right down to the roundabout
And that would be probably out of peak time as well.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, so we'll get on to the report. So thank you very much for presenting your petition. I know there was a lot of legwork involved with 500 plus signatures, and you got it onto the agenda today, so thank you very much. So if you'd just like to take a seat behind you, and then I'll invite staff up, and the committee will discuss and debate the item for you. Chris, Robin and Phil. Right, so we're on page 102. Chris, you can take the report as read. We've accepted the petition, and that's been tabled. And your staff recommendations on 103. So questions of the report. Councillor Mallett.
Just getting a whisper from my cobber on the left here. I've just noticed that the traffic volume's increasing significantly. 2013 to 14, it's gone up by 40%, from 10,000 to 14,000. What are the projections going forward from now? Leo suggested it might, don't mind if I quote you. Leo suggested it might be sort of 20,000 a day. That's a huge increase.
It will be in that order, and that's the strategic network working. So that's our intent, is to put the traffic on this.
So that's what we want. That's what we're planning to do.
Essentially, that's what we're planning to do. That's why we have a 4-lane corridor there, which will at some point in time move to 4-lane with higher quality intersections, probably sometime in the future. Just between 12 and 13, so about 2010-11 was probably when the Crosby Road roundabout was built and connected, and the big jump in 2013 was probably when we got the ring road down to Ruakura, and it started significantly changing the traffic patterns in Hamilton, which is the project doing what it's intended to do.
But which will magnify the issue that is the petition is concerned about, isn't it?
Yeah, clearly when it gets to the point of requiring 4-laning, a fundamental review of the intersections would need. Just to give the petitioners some reassurance, Council at the right point in time would engage with stakeholders and the community over the right form of intersection. So we've said in the report at this point in time we favour the eastern intersection, but that decision would be arrived at through a proper consultative process and a bit of traffic modelling and engagement as to what the right intersection was.
Thanks, Chris.
Councillor Forsyth?
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. If with consultation with the community you come up with a number of action points or that you decide to put in place, presumably, okay, the worst or the furthest end of the spectrum would be left turn only, no right turn, but clearly that's less convenient, and during off-peak hours the ability to turn right's not the issue, so it's what happens at those peak hours. So is there some sort of tipping point where after the interventions have taken place, you've monitored, etc., it's got to a point and then you go to that next left turn only step? Is that how it could possibly work?
Yeah, it would work based on the performance of the intersection. So the performance would be the crash record. So clearly, as Councillor Tooman has just been pointing out, if we look at the crashes at the moment, they are related to the gap acceptance, and particularly people sitting at the intersection looking to the right. So I think the proposal and the minor safety that we have proposed, which is removing particularly the slip lane further back, that's designed to get that traffic out of the sight line, so there's a better sort of sight distance as you're sitting at the intersection and looking right. So we think that will improve the situation, but it may get to a point in time with increased traffic growth where the people are taking risks and the crash record increases, and the only safe way would be left in, left out in our view. You know, pending acceleration of the, a fundamental traffic signal or roundabout or grade separation design.
Okay, so I think that was a yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Would any of those interventions or improvements to affect the traffic, would they include anything like, apart from the slip lanes, etc., and that bay in the middle, like a resting bay? I don't know what the correct term is. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, in terms of the refuge bay or in the middle, that's a lot more tricky. We'll certainly look at that as we work with the community and look at the options, but to put that in is a lot more tricky than our recommended option, which is to move the slip lane back. So that would need careful thought, but we would have a look at it at the time a bit more closely.
Thank you. And last question, do the interventions include anything like, how at schools we have the intermittent speed sign that during those peak hours asks traffic to reduce to 40 k's? Is that sort of principle an option in a situation like this?
Look, we haven't flagged that as an option at the moment in terms of speed reduction. I think we are aware that it is a major arterial, and the efficiency of the arterial is quite important to the city as well. So it is an 80-kilometre-hour road at the moment. It's our view that it would be very difficult to a compliance issue to change the speed limit and have people compliant with the speed limit there. We haven't looked specifically at electronic variable signage, I think you're talking about, in terms of in certain conditions where you might bring the speed down, but that is possibly another option that could be looked at, but we haven't looked at that at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Young?
Yep. Hi, Chris. I just want to ask, similar to Councillor Forsyth's question, have you been considered like a vehicle holding bay that allow about 4 to 5 vehicles to wait and then cut into the lane heading forward? Because I noticed on the motorway heading up to Auckland, even on the 100K, they are doing that as well. And also, I agree with the speakers. The Huntington West intersection is pretty much close to the Hukanoi roundabout. So by the time the driver speed up, they're usually reaching about 50 to 80K when they reach that intersection. But can we be able to move that speed limit further to extend that 50K area. So a driver will slow down before they reach that intersection, or they won't speed up before that intersection. So if we can combine a couple of other small things, can we resolve that issues? Because right now I have seen a lot of vehicles, they are stuck in the middle. They're not going forward, they can't come backward because the traffic coming on both sides. And just frankly, I've been living in Huntington for 12 years. I know how that works. And yeah, so is that a possibility you can consider that?
Yeah, so one of the issues you're raising there is the same that Councillor Forsyth has raised in terms of the refuse bay in the middle. Look, it's our view that that's a difficult proposition in terms of just achieving that, but we are going to we will have a look at that as we look at the designs. But I think it would certainly be a lot more substantive rebuild of the intersection and almost possibly close to a major upgrade of the intersection. But we will have a look at that. I think the intersections you refer to on the Waikato Expressway, probably Oram Road is one that you're thinking about just before Mercer. That's a really high standard intersection with the refuge in the middle. So they're built specifically designed to a really high standard. What we're looking at is retrofitting the existing corridor, and it just gets a bit more tricky. But we are going to look at that. In terms of the speed limit, I think the speed limit all the way through that corridor is 80k, so there's no 50k speed limit on that corridor.
When you exit
the side roads might be 50k.
When you exit Huguenot roundabout, that should be still 50, right? Only up to a certain point I saw the 80k sign. So that means from the roundabout to that particular point is still 50k, right?
But correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but it's 80k sort of all the way through from, let's say, River Road, all the way through to Crosby Roundabout, around down to Ruakura and across the railway line. It's all 80k on that whole arterial, and it drops down to 60k just south of Ruakura Road.
But is there a speed limit on the roundabout?
No, there'll be a speed limit on the local road leg of the roundabout, but the posted speed limit is 80k through the roundabout.
Don't think you can travel 80
So,
km
sorry,
around.
Councillor Young, sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to be practical here. I don't think we can or want to design the final treatment by committee today. And Chris, your recommendation that you've put on the table, and we don't have a motion yet, is so that you can go back and work with the residents, the owners of the petition, to come up with a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah, that's correct. Like, the petitioners have been great to work with over the last few weeks, so we would continue that and keep them well involved in what we're doing.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mallett, question?
Just based on the crash stats and whatnot, how badly does this intersection rate?
It's a tricky question, Councillor, and your councillor to your left would agree with this. I think that any crash is bad, and we don't want any crashes on our network. But we have, if you look at paragraph 36 of the report, it doesn't feature in our top 10 in the city. It doesn't feature in our top 15. So in relative terms, it's not regarded as a high crash risk.
Is the fact that it's a difficult intersection almost mean people are ultra careful in it, and therefore you've almost got I don't know what there'll be some word to describe what I'm trying to say, but you've got almost people because they're so cautious going in there that you just don't get crashes.
Well, we would hope that the users of the intersection are generally regular users, and they would understand the issue. I think the point gets where people get frustrated and they sort of make decisions about the gap acceptance, and they're trying to guess gaps.
And I appreciate that lack of crashes or otherwise is not the only way of judging the use. If an intersection is just bloody hard to get through, that is a cross against it as well. So I appreciate that.
It's a little bit like the Gallagher drive intersection we've been dealing with. There's not a big crash record there, but it's generally regarded as an unsafe intersection.
Right, thank you.
Chair, I'd like to signal to move the recommendation when ready.
Okay, so recommendation on page 103, moved by Councillor Forsyth. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Seconded by your worship. Is there any debate? Margaret, would you like to speak? Sorry, Councillor Forsyth, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
No? All right, if there are no speakers on that motion, I'll
Start.
put Councillor
In terms
Gallagher.
of timeline for the residents, just repeat for me when again you anticipate, I mean, obviously I think it's really important that particularly East Ward councillors, in terms of some of the micro detail of this, obviously in the right room with you, I'm sure they will be, you're the expert of course. When are we looking at the initial resolution timelines?
So I think the
Short answer.
report indicates that would bring it to the discretionary transport working group for prioritisation in the 2015-16 year, so that's about the beginning of July.
Yes.
So we would aim to have the work ready to go in about July, Phil? Yeah.
Okay.
So over the next, 4 months, look to develop the solution so we're ready to go when the funding
Thank you.
potentially comes available.
Right, thank you. Councillor King, I don't think we've set the buttons up for use. Well, thank you for anticipating that, though. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you, Chris. Right, committee, we will go back to the other item. First item, Chair's report on page 5. And this is my Chair's report. You'll see that there is two, obviously the report to be received, and that the council improves the installation of the peace tiles in Civic Square. That's been going on for a little bit of time now. So with that, if there are any questions on the report, Councillor Mallett?
So it's just down here, is it?
Yes.
Yes,
Down there.
Sort of like where Captain Hamilton is?
yes, on the bunkers. We discussed this at the last Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, I think,
Oh, okay, I can't recall
and we
that.
had the pictures and everything in the report. You know, the concrete bunkers that look like Daleks from Doctor Who.
Cyborgs and things like that.
On page 8, there is an image which shows a couple of red lines,
Yep.
which is the
Yeah, I can see that, yeah. Thanks.
Question, Councillor Gallagher?
Yes, item 3, regional policy collaboration. Local government reform happened in 1989. This is now 2015 and we're having this conversation. To the General Manager, it would be really good that we keep getting an updated brief and reminder as to the cost of this exercise. I'm not against this exercise, but I wonder if we're still nibbling around the edges. This again highlights, and I will go on and on about this, the need for fundamental local government reform in a region of 400,000 people where we pay chief executive officers throughout the region over $2 million.
So his question was, will we get a regular update?
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Great. So I'll move my report if there are no further questions. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Tooman? Any discussion? All those in favour?
Right.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, page 9, we move to the open minutes of the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of the 19th of November and the extraordinary S&P meeting of the 10th of November, both 2014. And there is also an item B there on page 9, the extraordinary Strategy and Policy meeting of the 18th of February. Those minutes weren't adopted. Now, they were minutes from, or they're attached, but they were minutes from the psychoactive substances hearing, and therefore didn't have to go through to council, but they were missed off the list. They need to come and be approved here. And the 26th of February was the submissions analysis on psychoactive and the report, and that was adopted at 27th of February council meeting. Again, just missed off the list to be accepted by this committee. So I will move those. Councillor Mallett?
On page 13 of the minutes, under point 8, Hamilton City Library Strategy, the sort of second or third paragraph, I guess you'd call it, the General Manager, Community and the Libraries Director responded to questions regarding. It then goes through and we have 3 bullet points, and it keeps on referring to the library, the library, the library, which I assume refers to the central library, but the report was about all of our libraries and any libraries we might have in the future or any libraries we might not have in the future. I'm just wondering why it's all centric to the... Now that might just be a typo, but the way it's written, and if you look at the words around it, it does refer to, everything refers to the central library.
Yeah, I think it should be library in the wider sense of all the libraries.
Okay.
That was the topic.
I guess the minutes are not actually the paper anyway, eh? The paper is what was
Correct.
presented here. Okay.
All right, any further questions on any of that?
I'll second.
Thank you. So moved by myself, seconded by councillor Forsyth. Is there any discussion? All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Page 47, the draft council risk management policy. Item 7, and we have Barnaby and Dave. Welcome.
Thank you.
You can take the report as read. We're going to go straight to questions. Now, I just want to clarify for elected members, I did question this. On page 49, we have a clean copy of the new policy, and on page 57, you have the track changes. I don't think we needed the clean copy because you can see the track changes quite clearly, but just to clarify why there actually is two copies of the draft policy in there. So we'll just go straight to questions. Councillor Mallett.
On page 47, executive summary, a review of council's risk management policy has been undertaken by the Risk and Emergency Manager Unit. And I've just written who are these people. But I guess I want, yep, gotcha. I guess I want, and maybe it's in here and I haven't picked it up, but where do you guys, Barnaby and
Dave,
sit in the organisation? Where are your authorities?
So they come under my jurisdiction, so part of my group.
Yep.
And this particular review was conducted, first of all, through a discussion through the Audit and Risk Committee, and then subsequent to that meeting, the staff have worked, first of all, with the chairperson of that committee, and then through the members of that committee as well. So that has been where this review process has its origins.
And maybe my memory is failing, but has this been to council before?
This is an existing policy.
Oh,
It's due for a cyclical review, so this is the review.
So it's the first time this council will have seen it?
This time, but previously a council policy.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Yes, thanks, and thanks, David, for your work on this. I guess a robust risk policy is pretty fundamental to an organisation like this and of utmost importance as far as governors are concerned. And I appreciated the opportunity to make some comments, which I did back in January when that first draft was done. One of the areas that still concerns me a little is the lack of the word timeliness in the policy, that if there is a risk identified, naturally it should be incumbent upon whoever identifies that risk to work in a very timely way to have that risk identified and the appropriate people or person in the organisation to act upon it. So whilst I think reading it does give some direction as to how the organisation should respond, it doesn't really give a sense of urgency or timeliness to how quickly matters might move in order to have the risk mitigated. Can you perhaps give me some sort of comment as to why is timeliness considered elsewhere, or?
Yes, so when the feedback from the other members of the committee who fed back felt that this was probably more an operational issue rather than a policy issue, and it would cover it in the SOP that we have. So I'm happy to field that with you offline, but there is a comment in here that high priority risks are to be related immediately, and I think they felt that that was enough.
Okay.
That's covered in section 5.1 of the policy.
I did see the word
reporting,
immediately.
reporting
Yeah.
extreme risks.
But it didn't seem to be a theme running
I'm
throughout the policy.
Yeah.
So there is another policy, there is another action item somewhere else that responds back to this that does make it incumbent upon staff to act on a timely basis to mitigate against any risk.
Yeah, so
that-
we have
that becomes
SOPs that would
identified.
support this at an operational level, was in terms of turnaround. So we set quarterly meetings for a risk forum. All those dates are, but rather than putting a policy in case those dates ever have to change, it was easier to change an operational document than a policy.
Okay, okay. Right, thank you.
Councillor Mallett?
I'm very new to this sort of stuff, so I don't quite know what the risk policy does. And I just read the policy outlines Council's risk management philosophy, risk threshold and approach to managing risk. It all sets out the principles which guide Council's risk philosophy and the structures and processes necessary to implement, etc. There doesn't seem to be any risks identified in this thing, like, you know, the risk of an earthquake or the risk of a crash of our communication systems, the risk of fraud, the risk of loss of governance. There are no list of risks here, is that right? Is there a schedule that
Yes, we have all these risks that you talk about will be in the risk register.
Oh, so there is a list of
This
them
is an
somewhere.
operational document that's reviewed constantly.
So you've got a list of things that need to be looked at. Who checks those things?
Councillor Hing.
So Councillor, I'll just remind everyone that there was a workshop on risk late last year. And Councillor Miller, I think you attended that workshop as well.
It was a half-day
It
one.
was a half-day workshop where
Was it?
councillors
Okay.
sat and discussed our current risk register and also identified some other risks for Barnaby and Dave to go away and look at, and they were then subsequently reported back to the Audit and Risk Committee. So
Remember, we put everything on the whiteboard and we
Whiteboard
discussed
discussion.
it and backward and
Oh,
forward.
okay.
So, and I guess just further to that, the Audit and Risk Committee receives the risk report on a quarterly basis, where they have a chance to interrogate that. So there is a regular reporting cycle formally to this council.
Okay. So the management policy ranks risks, manages risks.
So what we have in here, and I think it's in this one, so it would be, I think it's potentially more in the management policy. It has the, oh no, it's there on page 54. It's the 5x5 model, which is best practice. That's effectively how we rank and score risks. So it just gives it a very high level for governance. As you get down to management level, yes. And then you would have the supporting SOPs and documents to show how we manage and assess risk.
So all of our risks on the register are put into one of these things. So something that's
10 times over. So there's 10 categories reviewed on that 5x5, 10 times.
Okay.
And they're coming up with a mean result.
so
I think-
something that'll have a minor consequence that's very unlikely to happen.
Yep.
We basically do nothing about.
It would still be, we wouldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
It's still registered.
But something that's certain to happen and catastrophic.
Yep, that would be notified to governance immediately.
Okay.
So councillors, our risk framework has been audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers as part of the internal audit process. It follows good practice. This is a very standard risk model. We identify a gross risk. We then identify controls and mitigations, and then there's a residual risk. So there's a residual risk that council and staff are focusing on. So that is after our controls and after our mitigations, that is the risk that we are still focused on in terms of.
So is there a group that has monthly meetings?
There is the risk manager, Barnaby Pace, is constantly looking at the risk registers, talking with staff. There is regular risk reporting to the executive team. There is a risk forum which assesses new risks, and they are formally reported to Audit and Risk Committee on a quarterly basis.
So do you have minutes and things?
From those meetings, I sit down with all of the GMs on about a six-weekly cycle,
Yep.
and we will go through the risks which they own or responsible for, and then any changes they make to those captured within our risk register. The risk register also holds the historical information relating to them, so it's not just the current one, but the previous.
Can you give us an example? One like water risk. I say there's no water. We're right out of water. Is that something that go on the risk register?
Yep, so there is a risk on here for.
Barnaby, can you just talk into the microphone?
Sorry, Mark. Sorry.
There is a risk on there around the Low River.
Yep.
And which is currently under review. But that one's very seasonal.
Very what?
Seasonal.
Oh, seasonal, yeah.
Okay.
So that one there,
Short
I sit down with the GMs responsible for that. We go over the risk, and then if anything needs changing, we change it, and then that gets reported through the Audit and Risk Committee.
Presumably the GM manages the risk. You alert us, do you, or what's your purpose? You're just another layer to make sure that someone is actually looking after these things.
So I facilitate the process around that. So I look after the risk management framework and make sure that the correct process is being used for the assessment and identification of risk.
Okay, thank you.
I think I know what you mean.
Councillor Forsyth?
Yes, I'd like to remove the staff recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor
second.
Forsyth. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Would you like to speak on that, Councillor Forsyth?
No.
All right, so if there is no debate, I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you.
Chair,
Right.
could I just ask that the General Manager circulate the current organisational risk register, which goes to Audit and Risk Committee? Could you circulate that to all councillors so that they have got it for themselves on the, I mean, it's available, obviously.
Yes, it is.
Just electronically, we don't.
Yes,
Yeah.
just electronically, so that we can, that everyone's got the latest risk register.
We'll arrange that today,
and,
councillors.
and including the risk rating currently against those.
That's correct.
Because the Audit and Risk Committee review those.
Presumably that'll have
Okay,
actions
yep.
derived
Thank you.
coming from it.
You'll have a summary schedule, which
Yeah.
you'll see today.
All right, thank you. So we'll make sure that's done. Page 66, we're on to item 8. This is the proposed alteration to Garden Place pedestrian mall. Now, this is a deliberation and a decision report. You'll remember committee last year we had 2 reports. They've been combined into one. And, so we've got Chris down at the table. Welcome. Chris, you can take the report as read.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Forsyth.
Item 8.
Questions,
Sorry,
Councillor
that-
Mallett?
just
So, Councillor Gallagher, we're on item 8, page 66.
And it says recommendation to council.
The recommendation's on page 67, yep. Councillor Mallett, question?
Just to be very clear, I have read the report.
Haven't or you have?
I have, yep.
Oh,
The council determined that following the outcome of the consultation period, the Garden Place pedestrian mall boundaries remain
we
as
can
are,
read,
which in effect means there will be no additional car parking.
Which means there will be no
Less.
car parking.
No, yeah.
Because at the moment you are not allowed to park there. So this will reinforce that there is no car parking there. So our further recommendation is that we work and look, it's an enforcement issue for us. We do a lot of ticketing there, but it probably needs just some physical changes, very minor, to just discourage parking and make it a little bit more obvious to people that they shouldn't park there. So that was.
It's here, eh? Just there, is that right?
It's just here in front of the shed space.
And so
just in
people
front of
kind
the-
of think they can park
Yeah,
on that side of it, don't they?
Yeah, so look, we would look to work with the discretionary working party, but a little bit more signage, but maybe a few more strategically placed things that just don't open up the area for car parking.
can I just add to, thank you, Chris, Councillor Mallett, that this is the last step in the process, that there was a hearings, a panel chaired by Councillor Tooman, and there are very few submissions, Councillor Tooman, would that be fair to say? And
Mainly from a disabled person to
Yeah.
most concerned.
And I note there was no submission from the Hamilton Central Business Association, so it obviously wasn't flagged as a huge deal to them and their members.
So the net impact will be a place that is not allowed to be parked on at the moment, but will be more rigorously enforced. That's basically what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Net impact would be nil. 'Cause
Right,
yes, it is.
Any further questions? That's been moved by Her Worship the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Forsyth, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
We're allowed to speak
Oh,
to the motion?
sorry, yeah, I always do that, don't I?
Yeah.
Sorry. Would the mover like to speak first, Your Worship?
No, I don't have any.
Okay, Councillor King, debate.
Yeah, I'll be voting against this motion. I believe the city desperately needs car parks. Yes, there might be parks 100, 200 metres down the road, but let's get the car parks where the people want them. I know this has been through public consultation, 15 to 28. It's not overpowering. The reason for the decision on the staff recommendation is due to the outcome of the consultation. And in paragraph 13, it says that this part of the pedestrian, halfway through paragraph 13, that this part of the pedestrian will be changed to a shared zone. Then council would have the flexibility to determine through a separate bylaw register the process of whether to allow parking or not. Why wouldn't we give ourselves the flexibility?
Thank you. Any further speakers for or against?
I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I think, here we are in 2015, and it's really time that we had a separation between the pedestrian and the motor vehicle. I know by driving through here, there is great confusion between the motorist and the pedestrian. The pedestrian think they've got the right of way and the motorist thinks that they have the right of way. And I think by the removal of their, it will send a signal that this is a shared zone. In other words, at the present time, the motorists think it's theirs, and it's also the pedestrian think it's theirs. So I really believe that we have to have that separation, and by removing the parking along the wall of the grassed area with more signage in that, people will actually get the message. I hope that this is an area whereby pedestrians can utilise the green area out there into the square here.
Thank you. There being no further speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? Keep your hand, and did you get Councillor Mallet as well? No, you didn't.
Councillor Mallet and Councillor King against.
Great. So that's been carried. Thank you. Right, item 9 on page 74. Retrospective approval. Submissions are moved by Councillor Forsyth. Thank you, Councillor. I'll second that. Are there any questions?
Yes, comment.
Questions first, please. No questions. Right, debate. Comment. Yep, Councillor Gallagher.
Just refer to page 79, under road safety, page 56, and I'm unsure of what, in terms of the Regional Land Transport Committee, and I'm sorry I don't have the document with me. Obviously, I just, as I've discussed with Councillor Tuman, as the Deputy Representative on the Land Transport Committee, and obviously along with the Mayor, I believe this city would certainly want that Land Transport Committee to keep an absolute focus on the progress to be made on crash barriers. And we have recently had 2 undescribable tragedies, and it is not for me to exactly prejudge coroner's report and a proper serious accident investigation that will be undertaken, but in both cases, on the surface, it would appear that crash barriers could have meant a very significantly different result. So all I'm doing, and I realise this is a regional matter because these are regional roads, but as a city, we are vitally concerned with regard to our roading network and anything that can be done to prevent such tragedies of head-on collisions on our major state highway network. Both of the roads are obviously very, very busy routes. So I just, I guess, saying to Councillor Tuman and the Mayor, if you would note that concern in your representative role for this council. I also want to make some comment with regard to the passenger transport as well.
We can do that now, Councillor Gallagher.
Okay, just again, I think picking up with staff item 15, and I acknowledge that you did, Chris Allen and co, we did have quite a bit of input in that, and I compliment you for that, and I think there was informal meetings around that. However, I think the final wording on item 15, page 82, this is to do with future passenger rail services, where it says the HCC is supportive of continued investigation into the provision of a passenger rail service between Auckland and Hamilton, but only when it is appropriate to undertake further work, recognising this as a medium to long-term priority. And I'm not sure what you mean by medium. I mean, someone could help me. What's medium?
When the Labor government gets in.
So you'd have to read it in the context of the strategy that was subject to the consultation. So I think there were two parts to it. One, we had advice from councillors about strengthening the future passenger rail service, and we were able to influence the document before it went out. So this submission was really supporting the notion that got put into the document. So I don't have the document in front of me now, but I think the medium and long-term priorities were priorities established in the regional and transport.
Just in years, like when we talk of medium, I just want to sort of time lapse. 1, 5 years, 10 years?
So I think it would just be off the top of my head, but sort of medium would be sort of certainly beyond the 3 years. I think a bit like us when we look at our first 3 years of our LTP, that short term, medium to long term is anything outside that.
No, thank you. That's helpful. And obviously, to me, we need to do whatever we can to make sure that we're future-proofed, particular commuter-type stations. And obviously, it just seems to me in terms of 15, and this is not a party political statement at all, one does get a sense that if there was a change of government in this area, that particular Labor Green government would be more enthusiastic. And as David Bennett gave me some really good advice, when the Blues are in, you take the blue money. When the Reds and possibly Greens are in, you take their money. So all I'm saying is that I recognise at the moment it's not in the frame, but I would just say that we should be certainly keeping an eye out for that. And I think as we develop through our LTP process and all of that, one of the critical competitors' advantage Hamilton has over other places, obviously, is its strategic closeness to Auckland, and then we get into the housing affordability, commuting and all of that. I don't expect to litigate this debate here, but all I'm saying is I would hope through our representatives on the Regional Transport Committee and Passenger Transport Committee and staff is just keeping an active eye on it. That's all I'm saying. But if you're saying that's sort of beyond 3 years, that's about right.
Thank you. Any further debate? That's been moved by Councillor Forsyth, seconded by me. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Councillor Millett is against. Thank you. That's been passed. Right, we've done item 10, so we're on to item 11, page 111, traffic bylaw deliberations and adoption report again. Welcome back, Chris. You might as well just stay there. And this again has been, is the last step in the process and has been under the careful eagle eye of Councillor Tooman in the hearings panel. Councillor Tooman, your report is on page 116. Is there anything you wanted to highlight or speak to?
So, through you, Madam Chair, can I just make one comment first?
Yes.
In terms of process, it's important that Council, so we've got a deliberation and a adoption, so it's important in terms of process that we deliberate in terms of part 1 first.
Yep, so this is deliberation, which is questions on the issues and options, if there are any questions. But Councillor Tooman as Chair.
It's basically considering the shared zone out here where the public have their input. Nothing else to be added, really, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So are there any questions on the issues? Part 1, which is point 25 on page 113 there. Again, there weren't very many submissions received. So it looks like there are, we've deliberated. And we can move into part 2 then, which is staff have got a recommendation on page 112. Are there any questions on the staff recommendation at this point.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by Her Worship, seconded by Councillor Forsyth. So questions, did you have a question, Councillor Mallett?
Yeah, just, and maybe I missed it in the report, but B says council determined that the Hamilton traffic bylaw does not give rise to implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Can you, what is the concern?
It's
standard.
It's a requirement under the legislation that we must specifically state that the Bill of Rights is not contravened by the bylaw.
Oh, okay. So there's nothing. Okay, so there's nothing.
It's a standard clause that we must state.
It's always included. No further questions. It's been moved by Her Worship the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Forsyth. Any debate?
I might just add, Chair, that I'm pleased to see there is the issue about parking on reserves is addressed, because we have in the past had a number of those issues raised with us. So thanks to Councillor Turman and the staff for including that wording. I think it's a really good idea, because people do have a lot of issues with it.
We do, yeah. All right, no further speakers. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. Right, item 13, page 1. Where am I? Oh, sorry, I've jumped ahead of myself. Item 12, page 163, proposed stormwater bylaw. And Chris again. Yes, we do. We do indeed. You can introduce your guests.
163.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Hi, welcome.
Yes, good afternoon, Your Worship, councillors.
Oh, thank you. Oh, where is he from? Yeah, where are you from? Sorry, state your name.
I was going to get onto that.
Yep.
My name is Hugh Keane. I'm from the Waikato Regional Council. And I thank you for the opportunity today to present a short submission from the Regional Council in support of Hamilton City Council's proposed stormwater bylaw for the city. As I said, my name is Hugh Keane. I manage the resource use infrastructure team at Regional Council. And I'm responsible, our team is responsible for consenting, monitoring, and on occasion undertaking enforcement action in regards to the 3 water issues in the Waikato region, including the discharge of contaminants from stormwater systems to surface waters.
Sorry, Hugh, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I've been given misinformation here, well, not misinformation, but were you expecting to speak in the public forum? It was my understanding you were going to be sitting next to Chris Allen as the WRC rep in case there were questions from the committee. That was my understanding.
We were invited to come along today and present a short submission.
We don't have submissions in a committee, an agenda item like this. No, I'm sorry, we don't.
Point of clarification, if an invitation was given to the Waikato Regional Council to present a submission, I would, let me finish, please.
No. Councillor Gallagher, I was addressing the GM, so just if I can get it straight first, you may not need to ask your question. How was I confused?
sorry, Madam Chair. It was my understanding that Hugh was going to speak in the public forum. I thought it had been a request to put it just prior to the bylaw.
Okay.
But I'm more than happy to sit here in tandem with Hugh and work through the report and have Hugh answer any questions.
Okay. Hugh, can you summarise what you were going to say?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Yes, I can.
Off you go.
As I said, I'm here in support of the bylaw.
You are.
Proposed bylaw. And I guess I just wanted to touch on three issues that I consider relevant in your consideration of the bylaw. One is that there's a comprehensive stormwater discharge consent in place for Hamilton City. This was granted in 2011 by the Regional Council without the need of a formal hearing, because all submitters agreed on the intent of the comprehensive consent. This is a blanket authorisation for stormwater discharges from the city to the Waikato River and its tributaries. This consent requires the city over time to improve water quality and investigate and make improvements where practical to the stormwater network. As part of this consent, Hamilton City has a stormwater quality improvement program, and I consider a stormwater bylaw will assist Hamilton City in improving water quality and complying with its comprehensive discharge consent. Another issue I wanted to just touch on briefly is spill management and response in the city. As you probably know, both our councils work closely in responding to and investigating spills through the urban stormwater network. Often this has been caused by a third party discharging contaminants to the system. A recent example was an oil spill to the river, which probably came from the Franklin rail yards. Both the city and regional council work closely together to identify and prevent further oil discharges, which culminated in Kiwi Rail decommissioning an old oil water separator and thus improving their management of washing of rolling stock at the yards. However, I would say that councils cannot always rely on a third party to be so proactive, and that a bylaw can be an efficient tool in effecting change. The third issue I wanted to touch on was just small lot developments in our city. The expansion of North Hamilton in the last 15 years has required both councils to actively engage with the developers and builders to ensure that housing building sites do not cause excessive runoff of contaminants such as sand, soil, concrete and paint washings to the city's network of stormwater systems, stormwater ponds and pipework. And ultimately these contaminants will end up in our urban streams. Whilst both councils have effected real improvements to the industry, there still remains a few parties who are reluctant to adequately maintain appropriate earthworks and sediment controls to prevent damage and excessive runoff to Hamilton City's stormwater network. So in summary, I consider the bylaw will be an effective tool in improving urban water quality and will support the city's requirement to manage and protect the stormwater network, to also provide guidance to residents, developers and industries, and further contribute to the health and protection of our urban streams, which is consistent with the vision and strategy for the Waikato River. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just before we move on committee, I did ask for Democracy to give us a copy, if you so wish, of the Memorandum of Understanding between the parties. So she does just signal to Jude if you would like to have a copy of that. So thank you for that. So we'll go to questions of the report.
Is there a copy of that, is there?
I just said yes, that just signal to Jude if you'd like to see a copy of that. Thank you. Look, I'll start with a question just on that Memorandum of Understanding. So on page 165, 2425 there, the wording there says it sets an expectation that will take all its steps available to manage its stormwater network, including adopting a bylaw. I've just had a very quick scan of this. It doesn't require us to do a bylaw for this, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Okay. Councillor Mallett.
If my memory serves me right, Blair, you've spoken to us on this in the past, and I think you've advised us that it is the bylaw is just another step up in the enforcement regime. Is that right? That there's a lot of education can go on. There's a lot of discussions and conferences can be had, but ultimately we need the strength of the bylaw backing us up to make this thing work.
I'll let Chris respond to that.
Maybe Chris said it to me then.
Yeah, that's essentially correct, Councillor. So look, we regard the bylaw as a very important tool in our toolbox. It's not a substitute for education, it's complementary with the education. There is a big education component of stormwater management that sits alongside the bylaw, but the bylaw is a document that sets out the rules and what is and isn't acceptable for businesses in particular to do on their site. So it is a very important tool in our view in terms of us being able to comply with our comprehensive stormwater discharge consent.
So when a big enterprise builds a big building and there's a consent, there'll be consents around wastewater, stormwater, etc. But and presumably, if those are not met, you've got the enforcement of the consent, which is a legal document, I assume. There's some sort of weight in that case. So we're talking about a situation where there's no consent in place, so there's nothing, they're not actually breaching the rules that they built the property on, but these are generic.
Yep, so it's more about management of the site at times, rather than, you know, the site build. It's about the management and the operations on the site, which is not covered by building consents. So it's covered, you know, it's just their practices that they adopt.
Councillor King?
Had you had this bylaw in place today, you know, in the past, would there have been any prosecutions?
So I can't really answer that. Certainly the bylaw would have given us great clarity in some of the issues that we've had to deal with in terms of what people can or can't do. I can't really answer whether there would have been any prosecutions.
Are they mistakes, or are they deliberate? What you
So some
don't
of the
know whether you
incidents
would have
we've had?
prosecuted or not on?
Yeah. So Emily, could you sort of outline some of the issues that we've had?
So if I just use the example that was just previously given about the Kiwi Rail site.
Well, what I was wondering is, are they deliberate or are they accidents?
Okay, so there was the two spills a couple of years ago. One was definitely an accident, and the second one was potentially could have been mitigated had we had known on the site that there was this old tank that could have been removed. So that one could have been avoided. Whether or not a bylaw would have helped, it would have allowed us to go in there, it would have allowed us to work with the site operators to actually set up some site management rules, which could have avoided the situation from occurring.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions, just I think following on from Councillor King's train of thought, maybe or maybe not. Just on page 176 of the bylaw, you've got scope there. My question is, because it says this bylaw shall apply to Hamilton, and then it says under control of council, who is this bylaw for?
Sorry, Councillor, just checking where...
Yes, 3 on page 176, scope. This bylaw shall apply to Hamilton, blah, 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 and any land, building, work or property, etc., under the control of council. Who is Hamilton? Shall apply to Hamilton. And then it says, and any land under control of council.
Which point? Yeah, so...
Do you know where?
It's our bylaw. Your question is apply to Hamilton, Hamilton City. That's your question, just the language that
Well,
we use there?
who is Hamilton? This bylaw shall apply to Hamilton.
I think it's the geographic area of Hamilton is the intent. So the land within our jurisdiction.
So you're saying the whole city and any land, building, work or property, etc., under the control of council?
Yep.
Am I reading that correctly?
Jurisdiction.
Yeah. So I think the intent is it will apply to any land, building, work or property or catchment within the area of Hamilton, within the TLA boundary of Hamilton. That was the intent of the...
I think also, Chris, in 1.2, the bylaw shall apply to the Hamilton City Council district. In other words, and that wording there implies the entire area covered by the Hamilton City Council.
So I'd certainly pick up your point about the wording. It could be a bit clearer.
Yeah.
Is that covered by the pursuant to Local Government Act 2002? Does the Local Government Act define what Hamilton is?
No.
Doesn't? Oh.
No. I think Blair is right. The Hamilton City Council district is probably the right definition of our jurisdiction.
Okay.
It is a bit clumsy to apply to Hamilton. So that's certainly something we can look at and correct.
And I just have one other question. On page 182 in the High Risk Facilities Register, there's a variety of activities that cover an awful lot of commercial and trade activity that happens in the city. What's the purpose of this, and what's the purpose of this risk register, and what's the actual consequence of a business owner in the city having a business that is on this register?
So there's approximately about 500 properties that we've identified that have operations on site which could lead to contamination of the stormwater network. These range from mechanical workshops to printers
Yep, we can
to
see the list, yep.
footwear, etc., So obviously, some of these sites have a more of an effect on a stormwater network if a spill occurred, other than compared to others. So where we prioritise this list, we will then work with those companies to work on a stormwater management plan for their site. So if a risk did occur, or first it will be try to eliminate all the hazards on their site, so there's no chance of a spill occurring in the first instance. The second one would be to then develop a plan that if a spill did occur, how would we mitigate the effects of that spill on the natural environment?
And, okay, so I own a bakery in Flagstaff, and you've got bakeries on a high-risk register. Someone, if this bylaw went through, someone from council would work their way through that list and contact me and say that I have a look around, and I'm assuming we do that through environment anyway, through the food licence, and then help me, do for me, or expect me to pay someone to do a risk management plan.
So we would be hoping to actually make that process as easy as possible for the operator. So obviously the amount of work required will be depending on the site. So if we take a bakery, for example, it's probably quite a simple site. It'll be contained to potentially where they store their flour materials that could actually have an impact. So their plan might only be 1 or 2 pages long, if that.
And that's something they can whip up themselves, or are you expecting, because the devil's in the detail here?
We're going to try and help them as much as we possibly can by providing templates and actually work them through the process and help them to help us as well. So we're certainly not requiring them to give them very limited information and for them to go off and source it themselves. We will help them through that process.
Other questions, Your Worship?
Can I just check on page 182, offences? The maximum offence penalty is 20,000 currently, is it? The reason I raise it is in some bylaws we put the amount, in others we don't. And I think it should be the amount. So whatever the amount is, can you put it in? I agree with some of the comments about the language. I think some work needs to be done on the way we format these and the way we write them. I want to just talk about consultation and engagement, page 166, 167 in the report. So when this was first mooted, we said, look, go out and talk to the key groups who will be mostly affected by this sort of bylaw. So I see that about 50 organisations were invited and 8 came. Got that right, paragraph 51?
Correct.
Right. Of those 8 of the rest that didn't come, did they not reply, or they just...
There was no reply.
No reply, okay. In group 2 of the owners of the high-risk facilities, because this is really where the bylaw is going, how many were of that group were in the 8?
So I'm just trying to work out the correlation here.
Yeah.
So information I've just got in front of me is the number of industry stakeholders that responded. So I can't actually answer your question because I don't know the total of group 2.
Okay.
So there were a number of owners of high-risk facilities, Emily, that did respond?
Yes, they did, yes.
Yeah.
Well, so there were 50 invited from groups 2 to 4.
Yeah.
8 were interested to come along and give their views. And my question was, of the 8, were they all high-risk facilities? Because this is really what the bylaw speaks to, high risk.
Okay, so we
Or
had,
was it mostly the not high risk? Would you regard
So
them as high?
5 were high-risk facilities.
Mhm.
2 were service builders and constructors.
Okay.
And then there was a response from the Employers and Manufacturers Association.
Okay, right. And the sort of invitations, they gave information about what it was about and why you wanted to talk to them and...
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, they would know that if this impacted on them or affected them, they could make an assessment.
Yes, we gave them a copy of the proposed bylaw. We had a conversation with them.
Okay.
Went through what it would, how it would impact on their business.
Right.
They've given us quite a bit of feedback.
This is the 8, though. This is not the 50 that we invited. So the 50 that were invited would have had a good sense of how significant this might be for them with the information they were sent.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and 8 chose to come along.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's, in my view, a low strike rate for a high-risk category. And they gave some good feedback. As a result of that feedback, did you make changes to the bylaw you've now given us?
No.
Okay. No changes?
No
Right.
substantive changes, yep.
Right. And they were generally, supportive of it all and obviously what we've written.
Yes.
Okay.
So my general understanding, Your Worship, is that the engagement was positive.
Yeah.
And particularly from the EMA as well, who represent a number of these businesses. So it was largely quite positive from what we were trying to do.
Okay, good. So I guess I'm just trying to work out why are we going to go and ask people again about what they think when I look at the significance and engagement policy and I see that paragraph 48 doesn't actually cover all the points in our significance engagement policy. So perhaps to step back, we're not required to do a special consultative procedure for this bylaw. We can determine that under our significance and engagement policy, am I right? Yeah?
So my understanding, Your Worship, is we've effectively done most of our engagement with groups 2, 3 and 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So it'll probably just be communication with them about the process. The
Yeah.
more significant one's probably group 1 in terms of our proposal
The
to
general
engage
public.
with the general public. Look, it's our view that the general public will be affected by this bylaw and should have an opportunity to provide some feedback, and that council can take into account when we bring the report back in May, I think it is.
How are you proposing it's going to be online? Is this right? We're just going to put it online?
So our thinking was online, but probably an advertisement in the local paper as well.
Okay. And then you're going to collate that and bring it back to the final report?
We would collate that and bring that to the final report on the paragraph 55 in May 2015.
We're not going to produce material and all that kind of stuff?
Depending on the feedback we might get from the public, but...
No, I'm talking about in terms of the engagement online. It's simply a matter of putting the bylaw online, giving a short summary of what it's about kind of stuff. That's what we're talking about. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. Of the 50, with the 50 organisations, all those that didn't come, because they assessed with the material you sent them that it wasn't that significant to them, you would write and give them a copy of where we're at, even though they didn't participate? Yeah. Okay. All right. Do other councils have, this is a question to the regional council person, do other councils in the Waikato region have a bylaw like this?
Yes, they do. Matamata has a bylaw. I think Waipa District has a bylaw. And there'll be 1 or 2 other TAs that have bylaws.
And is it sort of the same sort of wording, same sort of
Yeah,
pretty
fairly
much?
similar. Yeah, a lot of guidance and direction for
Yeah.
industry and property owners.
And have those ones that have had bylaws in place, how long have they had them in place?
I wouldn't know, sorry.
Because what I'm trying to understand here is, has it made a difference? Has it made a difference to what's discharged?
I think...
Because it's the punitive step, isn't it?
Yeah, I know Waipā District do actively monitor a lot of their sort of light industrial sites in, say, Te Amutu, with the bylaw prominent. And I think it probably does in terms of their compliance of their... Because they have a comprehensive stormwater discharge consent as well.
Yeah.
And they have to report on that annually. And certainly the feedback we get from Waipā District is that, yeah, the bylaw is effective for them. And does assist them when they're dealing with some of these high-risk facilities.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor King?
If there was an oil spill or a spill into the stormwater at the moment, would the person who, the company or whoever spilt the oil become liable?
Yeah, I guess the risk for an urban stormwater system is a third-party input, a third-party spill of something, contaminants into your stormwater system. And the example I gave of the Kiwi Rail one was both councils working together because it did reach the river. Both councils worked together to try and move up the pipe to see where that oil came from. And that involves CTV surveillance of the pipes. Kiwi Rail, once they realised, for example, that they were a probable source of oil, quickly moved to identify and close off that oil separator and entered into discussions with both councils to see what they could do to remedy, avoid or mitigate what had happened. And I understand there's been ongoing discussions with City Council, with Kiwi Rail regarding better protecting that site to ensure that to prevent any further spill of contaminants from their activities.
So Kiwi Rail, in that case, become liable for the clean-up?
We couldn't be absolutely sure it was Kiwi Rail because of the network of old pipes. You'll appreciate the old railway yard at Frankton has lots of pipes under the ground and no one's too sure where they go, but both councils felt it probably came from that area, and Kiwi Rail quickly sort of investigated their activities and identified this old oil water separator and quickly moved to have it isolated and looked at ways of removing.
So when you can prove which business spilled the oil and they're liable for the clean-up, why does a $20,000 prosecution on top help? How does that help?
There was not a prosecution of Kiwi Rail.
No, there wasn't, but
no,
because there couldn't be, because the bylaw wasn't in place.
I mean, every case has to be considered on its circumstances. You've got to consider the effects of the discharge. You've got to consider what the contaminant is. You've got to think about what steps the liable party took, I guess, to avoid, remedy or mitigate that activity.
So from our point of view, Councillor, I guess the one undisputable fact is that there was contaminant discharging into the river from our stormwater system. So the risk for us is, non-compliance with our resource consent. So look, it's our view that anything that we can do to manage our stormwater up the line reduces the risk on us in terms of non-compliance with our resource consent as well.
Without this bylaw, the business, when it's proved who it is still, which you've got to do that either way, whether the bylaw is in place or not, is still liable for the clean-up.
Yep, look, as Hugh has said, at times it is difficult to probably provide the evidence base that would be required for a prosecution. I think our collective intent is to try and manage and educate and just stop spills happening. Like as we've said before, we think the bylaw is a really good document to set out the requirements in terms of and help with the education as well. So we're all trying, not full prosecutions. We're trying to manage the situation as best as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I just like to signal that I'd like to move the recommendations, but with an addition, if I don't know whether that would be an amendment. I don't know how you'd like to deal with that, but the addition would be that along with the extra point that existing education program will continue under the proposed bylaw and will respond to the needs of the community as and when required. And the reason I would like that to sit with the recommendation is that I think that the value of a bylaw is greatly enhanced with an education program that sits underneath it or alongside it, and I think it needs to be a responsive education program that if the message isn't getting out there, we need to do some more work, and if we see the other way, then we're able to respond to that as well.
So, okay, thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So that's A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G, some wording around a continued education program. Can we put that on the board? And I'm going to, do we have a seconder for Councillor Forsyth's motion? That is a staff recommendation on page 164. I'm going to signal an amendment, but we need a seconder first. Or not?
I'm happy to second it. Well, it was about education.
Yes, so it's the staff recommendation on page 164 plus a G. Councillor Forsyth, what was the wording?
The existing education program, it's under the financial resources and implications, point 58, will continue under the proposed bylaw, but then I've added and will respond to the needs of the community as and when required.
You happy with that wording, Chris? Yes. Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Forsyth, seconded by the Mayor. I'm going to put forward an amendment when that's done. Is that correct, Councillor Forsyth? You happy with that?
Yes.
Yep. All right. I'm going to put forward an amendment which is A, B, C and D, but D is to stop at 2015, so that Council adopt the draft Hamilton Stormwater Bylaw 2015, full stop.
Sorry, Madam Chair, does that mean that you're excluding E, F and G as well?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, well, yes. Yep. So I would be looking for a seconder for that. And the reason I'm taking out public engagement is engagement's about dealing with issues of common importance, and given the high risk people that were sent letters on the high risk register and the very low response, gives me some comfort that those people out there with common importance and shared problems of the issues are over the top of this and comfortable. I don't believe that Joe Public will really have too much interest. But that will lapse if I don't have a seconder.
Yep.
Seconded by a Deputy Mayor. What are we doing up there? So that's the amendment? Yep.
Yes, the motion is A through to G, and the amendment is A through to D with the strikeout.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the amendment on the board at the moment. Yes. Okay. So is there any debate?
Just a question.
Yeah?
I'm probably supportive of what you're saying. Just, I thought bylaws had to go through public engagement. Do they not? As long as that's legal.
Is that a legal amendment?
We're just debating that. So effectively, what you're doing is you're taking on a little bit of a risk in terms of not going to the public engagement, but that's okay. I think it probably just needs a commencement date of the bylaw. We're just trying to look at the totality of the recommendations there. So if you're going to adopt the bylaw today, it probably just needs a commencement date. So you might want to add on there commencing from a certain date. We were just debating or just talking quickly about item C there, whether the bylaw does not give rise to implications of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. So we don't know the answer to that one. We haven't had time to consider that.
Okay, so perhaps I'm going to make a suggestion. It's 3 p.m. Let's stop for an afternoon
Just
tea
a
break.
point of clarification and
Yep.
process. So who's, if you're moving an amendment, who's then moved the original report?
I moved it, and I'm happy to speak to it.
But we deal with the amendment first.
No, but you've actually got, no, this is about process, so
Yes.
presumably you've actually got a,
We've got a motion.
a motion up, so all I want to know is who's moved and seconded the original, given that normally a chair would probably move the motion. In this
Well,
case, you're
no.
choosing to move an amendment,
Yes.
so who's moving an motion?
The
I
mayor
moved the
has,
motion.
the mayor has moved the motion.
I think Councillor Forsyth moved it, I seconded.
Well,
No, all I want is
yeah,
just,
okay,
so the mayor moved the original motion.
well, actually, I did have councillor Forsyth move the original
No, sorry,
motion.
Chair, it's right up there, sorry.
That
Well, that's
Forsyth
what
moved, that's
yes,
fine,
that's what I was
okay.
saying.
And then you've moved amendment,
I
seconded
have.
Councillor Chesterman?
Yes,
Right?
and we're just going to break for afternoon tea because there may be, GM needs to check that that amendment is legal. So we'll break now and we'll come back at 3:15.